great. So I think we're going to start now. So again, thank you for joining us. For those of you that have just joined, you're listening to Izzy. I'm the marketing manager at Beacon. And today you're going to hear from Steve Williams, the managing director, and also Mark Hutchinson, the risk engineering consultant at Beacon. So before I hand you over, I'm just going to run through a couple of housekeeping notes. Firstly, your microphones are already turned off, but you can ask questions throughout the session using the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screens. So please do ask away and we'll answer those at the end. Another thing to note is just that the recording from today will be available after the event. So please, you can look out for that. And just a quick note on following us on social media, which I'll touch on again at the end. But just to know that we are on the major channels now on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. So if you follow any of those channels and you use them, then do follow us for the latest. But otherwise, I'm going to hand you over to Steve to start. Thank you.
Thanks, Izzy, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about, it seems like it's been a long time coming, but the plotting the path out of lockdown. But we're going to address it under three headings, which are infrastructure and safety management, which my colleague Mark will deal with, and then I'll pick up the people aspects of it as well. So we now have from the government, for those of you who don't know us, and I haven't experienced us yet. So just to explain, Beacon provides a combination of cloud-based risk management systems that will help you drive day-to-day functionality, compliance and risk management of health and safety, business continuity, environmental, blended with a flexible risk consultancy model, which is effectively a pay-as-you-go, build the services you need it resource that you can use if you require. And finally, what we consider to be our kind of Colonel Saunders secret ingredient is something that we call engagement, which is the kind of unlimited remote support that we provide our clients to get fully up and running and our systems and solutions embedded and operational in their business. So we obviously now have a path out of lockdown. The dates have been announced and hopefully nothing getting in the way. We should see ourselves in a position by June where we are kind of back to the new normal. So in addressing that, and as we move towards that reopening, for some of us reopening, because some businesses have been open all the way through, we want to take you through some key considerations to think about. So I'm going to hand over now to Mark to address the first of those, which is infrastructure. Over to you, Mark.
That's great. Thank you very much, Steve. Good morning, everyone. First of all, what I would like to do is to start off considering the infrastructure such as buildings, plant, equipment, the location or the work environment and the issues associated with it, and then move on to the safety management system, including risk assessment. So putting the COVID risk assessment to one side for a time, there are wider implications and considerations to think about as we try to reopen up our business, maybe for the first time, maybe for the second time, maybe third, or even numerous occasions. So let's just think about the working environment or the envelope and the building facilities itself. There's a whole host of issues to consider, from mechanical, plant, equipment, services and processes. So let's try to peel back the blinkers and the layers and take a wider view if we could. So taking the first point, for example, flushing out of water systems. In pipes around your building that may have been stagnant for up to maybe 12 months, we could say. Think about the clean and chlorination of those pipes and those outlets, and what actions might be needed to be taken, such as the use of, as I say, bleach or limescale remover, just to clean and disinfect all drinking water outlets. Think about any tanked water that you may have on site up in the loft areas, and to check to see if there's a biofilm that's formed on the top of the surface of that contaminated water that's been standing. If it's up in a roof loft, you know, as the temperatures increase, it gets warmer and warmer, and that's the right condition for this biofilm to start to form on the top of the water and contaminate it. And then you've got to think about the sort of the challenges of who cleans it and how you clean it and how you empty it and how you refill it. What about air conditioning units and other heating and ventilation systems? Ideally, this type of equipment, in my opinion, should not recirculate the air when the building is occupied. Windows and doors preferably should be open when the building is occupied to increase the rate of change of airflow in that room or environment. And again, it's likely that bacteria or dust or even fungi may have developed on the intake filters of air conditioning units. And how do we go about changing those filters or cleaning those filters? So obviously this presents other environmental challenges for us, but the guidance on opening the doors and the windows to encourage a more natural ventilation is the way to go. I would say that room temperature does not play a significantly big role in the life cycle of sort of COVID-19, but humidity does. So it's important to try and aim for maybe between 40 and 60% humidity in the workplace. And then let's consider, you know, what machinery, plant and equipment we have. If you're a manufacturing process, you may have CNC machines, lathes, milling machines, routers and drills, etc. But think about the oils and again the coolants that might be used in those types of machines. They may again be stagnating and may have a bacteria or some form of culture that could have formed within them. And what about the cleaning and flushing needs that need to be carried out on those pieces of equipment? And when doing so, do you have enough stocks of replaceable oils and coolants on site in your storerooms? Can your suppliers meet the demand for these consumables, as other businesses will be doing exactly the same? And now let's think about other machinery and equipment that you might have. So say, for example, in a woodworking environment, you would have machinery that might have guards and interlocks in place. And you need to confirm to yourself, are these working? Are these suitable? Have they been maintained? Have they been serviced, etc.? And that brings me on to sort of the statutory inspection side of things of plant and equipment, which may have fallen out of sync of the inspection regime for certification over the last 12 months. So let's think about the key assets such as forklift trucks, other lifting equipment, maybe overhead cranes, strops and chains, maybe motor vehicle lifting ramps, dock levelers, hoists, or even good lifts in your buildings. All these need to be brought back into the cycle of the statutory inspection and have your certificates up to date. You may have heating boilers or pressure vessels or systems such as compressors or even low exhaust ventilation systems, all of which have to be legally inspected to ensure their safe operation and functioning. And how can you ensure that the engineering surveyor who will come out to your site to inspect this type of equipment has the availability for convenient appointments to carry out these inspections? I would imagine the demand on his or her time would be very high as all businesses start to open up. So it's important to think about these and try and get a program in place and get appointments in the diary so the engineering inspector can come out and carry out these certifications on your machinery. What about the last time when your fire alarm was serviced, maintained, or inspected? Again, over the last 12 months, you may have missed a service inspection. Does the fire alarm panel show a fault on the system? Are smoke and heat detectors operating as they should? Do they need to be cleaned? Is there a need for a check on the annual fire extinguishers that you may have around the building? And do dry risers, if you have them in your building, particularly if you're in a tall, multi-leveled high-rise office block, for example, do the dry risers need to be pressure tested? And then what about sprinkler systems and their associated pumps and valve sets, or even emergency lights and final escape doors? Which brings me on to sort of electrical inspections in a way, or fixed wiring systems, and have they been serviced, tested, maintained and inspected? You don't know what condition they could have been exposed to over the 12 months if you've been shut down for the whole of the 12 months. You know, have you missed out on the 5-year certification that would be needed within the building itself? And then think about sort of other planned preventative maintenance activities that may be actioned that you forgot about from maybe the last 6 months. And other things to think about are sort of remote working or working from home. These create new challenges and bring issues into the mix, such as display screen equipment, workstation, assessments, stress, anxiety, and lone working. And how does all this hang upon your business risk assessments? For example, the equipment that you initially provided when people started working from home, is that still suitable and sufficient? I think we are a long way past the temporary stage now, and home working has become more of a permanent feature. So my question is, do we need plans for alternative work arrangements? Do we need to provide more suitable equipment for this group of people? And then again, the remote working aspect. What if you have delivery drivers, field service engineers, or visitors and customers to site, if you would, or your guy going out to site? How can you guarantee their safety, your employees and well-being, taking into account other working environments and welfare and provision for drinking water and toilet facilities? What other control measures do you need and checks and balances do you need to put in place? If you're a large organisation, you may well have what we call a lead authority. So this is where you have a number of locations across different counties, for example, but you just want to deal with one authority from a health and safety perspective. You may want to sort of pick up the phone and be quite proactive and notify them of your intention of opening up, and that may then help stem the sort of unannounced visits from the HSE at the moment. Like many of you, you will receive HSE email updates, as I do, where the current emphasis is on the COVID-19 spot check, and I can only see this becoming more and more prevalent for businesses as we get back to an operating norm, if you would. And then to sort of think, lastly on infrastructure, to think about and liaise with other third parties. If you're in a shared building, or maybe it's your landlord's building, your neighbours and others. So, you know, again, just think about industrial estate, or think about an office block with maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 floors in there, and different types of activity taking place. Could I have the next slide, please? I'd like to turn our attention to COVID-19 risk assessments. This type of risk assessment has exactly the same philosophy and structure as any other risk assessment process. The control measures need to be applied in a hierarchical order, starting with elimination, reduction, isolation, engineering control, protection such as PPE, discipline, administration, supervision and management processes. So it's no different than any other risk assessment that you will carry out. However, contrary to popular belief, there is no standard COVID-19 risk assessment. We all have to consider this in the round. Everybody's working place is different, so the control measures applied will also be different. And in order to get to the detail and specifics, you may need to create a suite of COVID-19 risk assessments for your workplace, as this will bring more clarity by breaking down what is required into manageable sort of bite-sized pieces. As an example, you might produce a COVID risk assessment for say a warehouse, for delivery drivers and dispatch drivers, and one for retail shop or front of house, etc. And we'll come on to that a little bit later. Your COVID-19 risk assessment will then enable the business to occupy your workplace. So it's important, if you've already got a COVID risk assessment in place, to go back, review it, have a look at the control measures, and sort of reinvigorate, if you would, the awareness around that risk assessment. And this risk assessment may have introduced new or additional control measures, such as social distancing, ensuring the building entrances and exits do not become congested. Maybe think about a staggered start or end times for shifts, and make sure that workstations and work areas are separated either by the perspex screens or by distance on the 2 meter rule. And where distancing cannot be achieved, maybe you need to think about sort of the team bubble sort of principle. To give you an example of that, I would think of maybe sort of refuge collectors in their vehicle, you know, a team of 3 or 4 guys working closely together day in, day out, and that team is separated from other workforce members, if you would, just to create that team bubble. So as I've mentioned, you know, reinvigorate your welfare and hygiene arrangements, such as hand washing, cleaning down of eating and kitchen areas, particularly communal water taps, maybe microwaves and kettles. Don't forget door handles and stair handrails, etc. And think about introducing new training for these control measures that you're putting in place. You may have to deal with different issues such as fire prevention or first aid, or even machine or equipment operating. And again, what I need to bear out to you is that there is a sort of a need for a procedure to cover notification of a COVID-19 outbreak in your workplace as it falls under RIDDOR. And as, again, another control measure as part of your risk assessment here could be temperature testing of employees as they enter and or leave the premises. And it's important that you can demonstrate this by recording those temperatures on a daily basis. And then to think about maybe what would the procedure be if a person presented themselves with an elevated temperature. You know, what would be the business policy in terms of isolation, if you would. And ensure your workplace signage is displayed, such as distancing and the 2 meter rule, maybe one-way systems in and out of your premises, entry and exit, maybe smoking area. And all this, again, this signage sort of, for me, really reinforces the communication message that you're trying to get across. On the subject of resources and maybe personal protective equipment, and the issue of gloves, masks, shields, face coverings, or hand sanitizer that you provide, it's all, again, all important to keep records of issue of the from an audit point of view, and then to ensure that these pieces of kit, if you would, are being used as and when they are required to be used, which can be borne out from the risk assessment. Travel to and from work. Maybe you need to think about and consider the types of vehicle being used, and where possible, maybe try to avoid public transport if you can. And finally, again, I would re-emphasise, don't forget to liaise with landlords, your neighbours and other parties. Can you have the next slide, please? So from your suite of risk assessments in your safety management system, I think my advice would be to firstly review the control measures that you have, or your existing control measures that you have in place, and then to monitor these control measures to make sure that they are suitable and sufficient and working as they should. And then there are other health and safety controls that also need to be reviewed, such as safe systems of work, method statements, etc., etc. And then maybe what about the size of the workforce itself as we return back in and get things up and running? Would you consider sort of a reduced number of staff initially, or have you been operating with a reduced number of staff in the workplace? And what effect does that have on sort of health and safety knowledge and skills? And has it created sort of a safety gap in the workforce? Do people with safety responsibilities, such as department managers, supervisors, need to be retrained? And does awareness need to be heightened? A little bit of anecdotal evidence here. I think I know of one business which was running a reduced workforce, and the member of staff was not fully trained and experienced on a particular machine, and this resulted in a malfunction and a blockage, which also resulted in a small fire. Putting the business out of operation only for a short period of time until it could be repaired. But again, you know, it highlights that sort of the importance of health and safety knowledge in the workforce. It must not be compromised in my mind. And the next slide, please. So again, you know, with a reduced workforce, you might have complex tasks such as manual handling large items, bulky items, or a lack of knowledge in operating procedures. And you've got to take account of this. So you might have to do additional training, for example. I've already mentioned remote and home workers and the permanent office feature now, and how these create new challenges and bring issues into the mix, such as the DSE assessments, the stress, the anxiety, and the lone working. And I think there is a greater focus now upon staff well-being in these times. And do we need to put in place maybe counselling helplines? Should our staff enrol on sort of maybe specific e-learning packages from a mental health point of view? And what are the effects on an individual home working from a team perspective? You know, does isolation come into play here? So I think it's vitally important that the business can demonstrate an audit trail of all its actions to help with any possible future claims defensibility. So I think, you know, signatures of persons attending training, understanding and receiving that information cannot be emphasised enough, because I'm sure that audit trail will become very important in the future. And then in addition to demonstrating your audit trail, I think as a business, you need to review and to monitor your risk assessments to ensure that the control measures within them are suitable, sufficient, and you've got robust, safe systems of work and other arrangements that are of equal importance. So maybe it's time to start thinking to put a program together now on how we review our risk assessments, and do we need to bolster and belt and brace our control measures. Can I have the next slide, please? So as I mentioned earlier about the sort of a COVID-19 risk assessment and how you could break that down into various areas. For those that use the BCARM system, this is a sort of a customized COVID-19 report which can be generated to demonstrate the compliance with control measures across various functions in different areas of the business. And this will help you focus on areas that may not be performing as expected. So what I'd like to do now is maybe pass back to Steve for any further comments on this graph and for Steve to continue.
Right, thank you very much, Mark. So I'm going to pick up now and talk about the people issue. And I think one of the things that is worth remembering is that people are the most uncontrollable element of any business. Much harder to control than machinery, plant, and computers. And two things worth considering: that it takes us 66 days on average to learn new behaviours. I don't know how many days it takes to unlearn behaviours, but it takes a period of time for people to learn new behaviours. And for those of you who have heard of the rule of 7, we need to hear something on average 7 times to retain it. So where you've had staff that have been out of work for maybe 12 months, but maybe a shorter period of time, there is a fair chance that some of their kind of safety awareness in the workplace has diminished. And what might have been protecting you and them in the business previously needs to be reconsidered and look at how we're actually going to bring them up to a place where they have that level of awareness operating again. Now, these are some stats that came out a few months ago, but I think it bears consideration in terms of our employees, because certainly in the UK press, unquestionably everyone is concerned about COVID. There is a sense of fear around it. So when we're bringing our employees back into the workplace, then we need to think about these issues, because these will have an impact on the way that they're able to perform at work. And there's another aspect to this as well. So for those of you who've attended some of our other webinars, we had a webinar recently on employee engagement. Employee engagement, quite a kind of one of those kind of hidden areas of the business that can really boost organizational performance. And if people are feeling unsafe in their working environment, this is actually playing on one of their basic human requirements of safety and security, for those of you who've come across Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that can actually have quite an impact on the way the organization operates. And in the employee engagement webinar that we ran recently, we highlighted something called the Gallup Q12 and pointed out that employee health and safety is quite a driver for some of the real basic drivers for employee engagement, which you can see on the screen in front of you here. So making sure that, number one, we have a safe working environment, but number two, that we're actually engaging our employees in that working environment is going to have an impact on how they're able to operate when they return to work, and how they feel about it as well. And for those of you who've not really seen much on employee engagement, the stats that you see in front of you indicate the difference between sort of companies with high levels of employee engagement and companies with low levels of employee engagement. So improve productivity, turnover, noticeably 64% less accidents as well. So making sure that we spend time communicating with the workforce about the new safety arrangements that are in place, reinforcing those to ensure that they feel safe in the workplace, but also understand what is required of them now as opposed to when they were at work previously, is all going to contribute, number one, to their safety in the workplace, but number two, their willingness to engage in, as the business opens up, I'm sure as the economy opens up, we are going to be all hands on deck because there's so much financial stimulus being created in the UK that many economists are talking about a boom period that could actually last 3 or 4 years. So as well as their well-being, thinking about rebuilding the safety awareness in the workplace, making sure that that we are reinforcing those new behaviours that we need them to comply with to keep them safe and their employees safe and the business open, and looking at the communication and awareness training that goes around that. Okay, so just a quick reminder for those of you who are BCALM customers, of the resources that you've already got available to you in BCALM to support you in this. So you can see them listed on the screen. So within the risk assessments, health and safety management system, there are specific COVID-19 control measure guidance that you can utilize when you're building or reviewing your COVID-19 risk assessment. There is a highly detailed return to work checklist that will help you go through what Mark covered in terms of infrastructure and also your safety management process as well, that you can work through to identify areas that you need to look at. And within the checklist part of the system as well, you can of course build your own checklists. And we know one of our clients, a multi-site retail chain, before they had to close down, had built a kind of start of day COVID hygiene checklist. So employees were going in and completing that every day, or the managers were going in their stores to complete that every day to make sure that they had all the safety arrangements in place. And the health and safety manager was then receiving alerts if they weren't scoring 100%. Another thing, picking up on Mark's point about reinforcing training, you now have the new safety briefings feature, which allows you off any risk assessment, checklist, safe system of work or method statement to get employees to sign using the mouse mount on a tablet that they have received and understood training, and that's immediately uploaded into their training record. You saw a report earlier that Mark was showing, so if you're looking to create greater kind of awareness of the performance around COVID controls, then in the reporting center, you can customize your dashboard with a COVID report, as you saw there. And again, if you want to know how to do that, we can always organize a webinar to take you through that. In the e-learning system, you've also got homeworking. For home workers, you've got the display screen equipment module, you've also got the stress module, and there's an additional module for home workers as well. If you're focusing on well-being, then again, the stress module, and we've got a new well-being checklist that we've just communicated to everyone. So if you want to add that new well-being checklist into your e-learning system, contact us after today. And then in general, when going back into the workplace, obviously you've got the usual suspects that are available: fire, manual handling, slip, trips and falls, costs, etc. That will be a staple of your safety arrangements. And finally, to mention something that we've evolved in the last 12 months, which is virtual consultancy. So we're working with a number of clients now, providing consultancy without having to go on site, and where we're using some new technology that allows us to effectively work with you to write a risk assessment remotely, walking around the premises with you. So if you want more information on that, be more than happy to talk to you about that as well. So thank you very much for your time today. We tried to give you a quick overview of the key areas that we think need to be looked at. So Izzy, any questions?
Yeah, so thanks, Steve. We're on to the Q&A, and just to remind you that the panel is at the bottom of your screen and you can ask a question through there, and I'll then ask it to the panel. So we have had a few questions through, which is great. I'll start with the first one. I think this was going to be towards you, Mark. Keeping doors open, what's your stance if the door in question is a fire door? Okay, so fire door, I would say no. Keep the internal fire doors closed, because I think that is sort of a greater risk, if you would. However, when I talk about opening doors and windows, those would be more on the perimeter of your building rather than the internal doors and fire doors. Okay. That's how I respond back to Graham. Great. Okay, thank you. Next question was, what guidance can you provide on lateral flow testing for employees who are not displaying any symptoms? in line with procedures, like, for example, that they have in place for schools?
Okay. All I could suggest on this one, in my opinion, and sort of something quite close to my heart. My wife works at a local college. The staff at the college get tested via lateral flow twice per week, and the students are being tested every week once, I think it is, in that respect. You know, the anecdotal stats that I have, that they issued over 1,000 tests last week, but only got one positive back. So, you know, even if you're not displaying any symptoms, you can sign up via the gov.uk website for your business to arrange to have lateral flow testing kits sent to your place of work, if you would. So it's not just for schools.
Great, thank you. And again, I think it's around temperature checking, but for office locations in shared buildings, is temperature checking for staff on arrival absolutely necessary and indeed possible and reliable?
Okay, so I've got first-hand experience in terms of I went out maybe at the back end of last year to do some consultancy work, and the business in question hadn't been carrying out their temperature checking, so they couldn't demonstrate that they had records available. So the HSE came down on them and asked them to put that in place via an improvement notice. So I would suggest it's a great way. It doesn't, you know, maybe 50, 60, 70 pounds for a top end thermometer. It's literally our staff come in, take the temperature, record against their name, the date, and away we go. So, you know, it's not impeded upon the business, but I think, you know, it's part of that audit trail, if you would, and it's certainly one of the questions that will be asked from these COVID-19 spot checks that are taking place.
Okay, thanks. Steve, I think this one's for you regarding the BCALM system. If I alter the controls hazards on my risk assessment within BCALM, will this create a new risk assessment? Will I be able to still track back to see the measures that have been altered, or in future ones, will we hopefully be able to remove? Can I show the stages of my risk assessment to show increases and decreases in controls along with when these changes were made?
Okay, the answer to that is yes, it will indeed. So when you make the changes to the risk assessment, basically it saves it as a new version. So you'll be able to go back in and look at historic instances of that risk assessment to look at what you've done. So yes, it will.
Okay, thank you. Another question around home assessments. So does the panel think that there will be a market for a home assessment service for the new home-based workers, given the company remains responsible for the welfare of staff?
I'm kind of happy to take that. I think there is a potential for that, but I think the issue there might actually come down to cost effectiveness if you're paying for people's time. So I think that in many respects that the assessment can be undertaken by the employee. You know, for instance, you know, within BCALM, much of that is an integral part of the e-learning system. And perhaps what you do is you then, where you have employees with high risk factors, then there needs to be some engagement there. But if you think about the cost of actually visiting you know, a high number of employees and the number of days that are involved, I think the cost could be prohibitive. But certainly for maybe employees who are in a high risk category, or perhaps dealing or exhibiting signs of well-being issues because of that remote working, I think, you know, there could be a place for dealing with those outliers rather than everybody.
Okay, thank you. Just to let you know, everybody, that we have come to around 40 minutes now, but we will carry on now and continue to answer these questions. So if you can stay on for another 2-3 minutes, then that'd be great. But if you need to leave, then we will send you the responses following the webinar. So just on to the next question. I think, Mark, this one's for you. You talk a lot about people returning to work while restrictions are still in place, but the advice from the government is still to work from home if you can. Isn't it more likely that the majority of staff will return to the workplace when control measures are no longer needed after June 21st?
I think my opinion is that once we start like the roadmap out, if you would, and we all return back to the workplace, if you're returning back to the workplace, I think it would be very wise to keep in place those control measures, because even though we're back in the workplace, COVID hasn't gone away. So, you know, we still need to be very vigilant on sort of transmission, if you would. So I think that the control measures that we have will be in place for quite some time.
I think I'd just like to add something there as well. I mean, if you think about the kind of the roadmap that we have out of COVID, so the pubs are going to be opening soon, but it's only the outside areas. So, you know, we're lifting restrictions, and as Mark said, we still have an active pandemic. So businesses will need to open up whilst we still have the need to control infection rates. So in office-based businesses, yes, I think, you know, there's a lot of evidence that, you know, many businesses are now looking at kind of home working as part of the mix of what they offer people. But anything in the leisure sector, then, you know, they're going to be opening up as soon as they can to get business flowing again, and they're going to have to operate in that environment. Not operate with the risk, of course, that if they do have an outbreak, if they're not controlling the potential spread, then that business could end up having to shut down again. So you then have kind of the whole issues around business continuity.
Okay, we've got so many questions to get through. I think this is obviously quite a topical area. So lots of them are very similar as well. So, you know, hopefully we're answering some of those already. I know that some people have asked around temperature checking and whether lateral flow is available to them. But if not, then we will answer your questions directly after the webinar as well. So just a couple more questions, and then I think we'll have to draw to a close. So one question, again, I think to the panel is, how do you see people's attitudes changing once having had the first and second vaccine, and what suggestions do you have for your customers in tackling what could be a change towards an increase in selfishness?
I'll pick that one up. I mean, that, you know, human beings recalibrate how they see risk by the second. You know, we all know what it's like when we're on the motorway and we nearly go into the car in front because we're going too fast. We immediately reassess risk and change our behaviour. So I think it's a really valid point that once people have had those first and second vaccinations, then they are going to have a lower perceived sense of risk. So really the only way that you can address that is by ensuring that within your working environment, that level of risk, or the level of risk control, forms part of your processes and procedures. So going back to what Mark was talking earlier about the safety management system, is what do you need to change within the safety management system to, for instance, highlight the levels of performance around COVID controls, keep reinforcing those messages. For me, it's a lot about communication and process to drive behaviour in the direction that we need. And it's, you know, in many respects, the attitude towards COVID is no different than any other sort of attitude in the workplace. So communication process will be key drivers in that, to keep restating, reinforcing those key messages.
Okay, final one for you, Mark, and I think we'll finish it there. But with the new ways of working, do you think we need to include a review, additional first aiders and fire warden?
Yes, and if you are returning back to the workplace and maybe you are on a reduced workforce, then I would certainly suggest that you need to review the cover of first aiders and fire wardens within your environment, within your business on there. So yes, I would say yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, finally, just to mention before we finish today, we do want to just highlight a new an area of learning which is free to our customers, which is Be Calm Academy, and we'll be launching that in April. So you can look out for the details of that. The Academy aims to deliver bite-sized learning on hot topics, and it's really available to support in-house training and also to develop your risk management knowledge. So if you'd like further details right now, and just to read up about it and also sign up your interest, then you can have a look at our website under the Insights and News section. We have a Be Calm Academy dedicated to running those sessions. So they'll be run every 2 weeks, starting in April. So please do sign up, and we'll send you more details of that as well shortly. So again, thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to sharing more insights with you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you all very much. Stay safe.